Hello, hello. Let me know if you can hear me okay, guys. I'm here. I'm going to do a paint over and critique and discussion, and this one might go a little bit long, but first off, I need to know that you guys can hear me because I didn't live stream yesterday because my internet connection with live stream was so slow that I could not get on. I called my provider about it. Sometimes it just happens. Yeah, so I'm here now. Hopefully, you guys can hear me. I'm just going to go ahead and keep going and assume you can. Okay, so today's paint over is going to be basically 50% discussion and 50% paint over about a big problem, two big problems that I see in a lot of portfolios. Specifically, this piece sums it up. And before I go into it, I just want to say, just for the record, this is going to sound very harsh. This is going to sound very critical. I don't mean it to sound that way. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just trying to help you give a crit that's honest and is going to make you improve as much as possible in the shortest amount of time. The point of these paint overs, the point of these crits, the point of these discussions is to make you address flaws in work, which can sometimes be a little awkward, a little painful to look at. I don't mean for this to be overly negative. I'm just prefacing that because I'm basically going to tell you to start this piece over from scratch because every step of the process is doing you a disservice, and I'm going to explain why. Now, the biggest problems with this piece, and a lot of pieces I see that are assembled the same way as this, is that whether or not you had a thumbnail, I'm going to assume on this one you didn't do thumbnail sketches, you just shot reference photos. None of the compositional problems are fixed on small scale, so when you automatically jump into the large scale, there's all these crazy drawing tangents, things are awkward, you don't know where the values are going to go, you don't know where the lighting is going to go. All that stuff is basically out of whack, and what it does is it means you put a lot of work into an image that's ultimately broken 25 different ways. This image is broken in so many ways that I just have to go through them basically. I looked at your studies that are on the artcamp forum. I looked at your blog. I looked at your work. This is Ryan Ja, by the way. I just want to make sure I pronounce that correctly. But, yeah. So, here's the thing. You're extremely good in your studies at measuring things, at doing relative proportions, at sizing, at lining things up, almost to the point where it's you're basically, I'm trying to find a way to phrase this. A lot of the stuff looks traced. I don't know if it is actually traced. If it isn't, congratulations, you did a very good job. But some elements of some studies look traced. Little things here and there jump out as, okay, well, that's slightly different. But the measuring, especially in a piece like this, which I'll pull over here for you guys to see, right here, this one right here, this master copy. See all these lines and hatches? You are not really drawing at this point and getting things wrong and learning from flaws so much as excruciatingly putting every possible thing in the right possible place down to, like, stroke by stroke essentially. And that's fine if you're doing a master copy, and the point of the master copy is to make it look as accurate as possible. But when you come into doing personal pieces for your portfolio and you start using photographs and shooting reference, the thing that happens is all of the life is taken out of your painting because you're not letting yourself make those mistakes. You're not learning from them. You're not figuring out how to draw before you jump into a painting and compositing it. So essentially, you're at the mercy of your photos. I found this on your blog. I'm going to pull it up because it's going to be a big part of this discussion. You have basically made a collage that is, two photographs of this guy that have been edited to look like one's coming out of the other, a photograph of this girl, photographs of wings that have a different lighting scheme than the girl, and then a bunch of stock photos of Renaissance fair people in the background that are fighting one another, that are either paintings from another artist that are for use, I would assume. The ones on the left look a little more painted than shot. The ones on the right feel like they might have been Renaissance photos at a low resolution. I'm not entirely sure. Some stock photos of flying birds. You collage it all together and you say, okay, I've now made a frame of reference for my painting. I can go in now, I can copy the light, I can paint over the stuff that's already there, and I can call it an illustration. And when you do this, you're leaving absolutely no room for actual creativity. You're not actually drawing anything, you're not actually designing anything, you're not actually painting anything. You're micromanaging every single piece of the painting with reference to the point where it basically just becomes a giant collage of well-rendered stuff that looks absolutely messy next to each other. Now, I know that sounds harsh. Again, sorry, I don't mean it to be. But when I come in here and I look at this painting and I zoom in like this, there's absolutely no reason for these guys to be painted this crisply. They're in the background. You've basically, I'm going to go ahead and say, literally traced or copied excruciatingly down to the detail the people in these photos. I'm going to go over here and take a look at this. Now, you didn't sketch these people, you didn't draw these people, you didn't design these people. And every single aspect of them, down to the placement of the belts, the designs on the shields, the bosses on the shields, the angles of the axes, the waves of the hair, have been copied in detail into your painting. If this is copyrighted work from another artist and not stock photography, this is actually grounds for plagiarism, which means that you're stealing someone else's work. If this is copyrighted photography that you're putting in here from something like National Geographic, and the photographer owns the rights, this is plagiarism. Okay? When I come over here and I look at these dudes, let me do the same on this Photoshop file. Again, everything. This guy, the helmet, the lighting on the helmet, the way the shadows fall, the angle of the sword. And then a very weird thing, because this is what I'm going to be talking about more and more as I go forward. This is the big thing I want everybody to take away from this crit. When you trace things and you copy things from photographs and you make sure that they're as accurate as possible to the photograph in an illustration, and then you suddenly make something up from the top of your head, it doesn't look photographic because your imagination and your skills aren't at the level of your ability to copy photographs yet. So when you copy this guy here, and the angle of his whole body's correct and everything's correct and he's got the sword and this and that, and then you say, well, I think it's going to be kind of weird to just have a hand coming in from off of the canvas holding a shield. I think I'll just make it look like this guy's holding up a shield instead, like he's charging towards the guy with his shield up. Right off the bat, because that wasn't in the photograph, you can tell that you made that shield up. The angle is wrong, the colors are wrong, the lighting is wrong. Everything about it's wrong, and it jumps out, and it doesn't look as finished as this copied photograph. So right off the bat, you go, oh, wait a minute. This person's actually not good at painting, they're just using photos, and then they're making up other stuff. If this had been the thing from the photo, I might not have noticed that because it would have looked uniform in its style and its execution. But because this is imagination and this is photograph, the two things next to each other automatically make me go, whoa, one of those looks like it's painted by a different person than the other thing. These are two totally different visual languages, two totally different uses of brushstroke, two totally different uses of execution and rendering. He's just dropping photos in here and either painting over them or adjusting them. Any art director in the world will see this and know that you're doing it, so stop doing it. The next thing to talk about with this girl, especially, zooming in here, you've either taken a helmet that's from something else that looks familiar to a couple helmets I could probably find on Google if I wanted to go look. But basically, the angle of the head doesn't match the angle of the helmet, so right off the bat, and the armor and the fur, so automatically, again, the same problem I just said. They shot reference for this face, I can tell because it looks photographic. They didn't have reference for the helmet, so they made it up. So automatically the helmet doesn't look like it sits on the face. It looks like it's pasted on top like a collage. The armor down here looks very detailed and photoreal. I can tell that you looked at something probably from a photo that had little clasps and buttons and lighting and stuff like that. But then next to it there's this fur, and the fur looks made up because it doesn't look like real fur. And I go, okay, so 50% of the elements are from photos, 50% of the elements are made up, so they're at odds with each other. They look like they're painted by totally different people, and it's breaking your image. The next thing to talk about, Oh, sorry, I drank a bunch of coffee, so I'm kind of hyper. The next thing to talk about, I guess, is going to be the wings. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out on this one. Try to minimize the coffee effect in my blood right here. So you took photos of wings, you dropped them in here to make her look like a Valkyrie. The wings have a very specific light source that is coming from, I'm going to say, probably top down here and then a cast shadow or something. For whatever reason, this one's in shadow. This one's catching light. The lighting's coming from this way, I believe, from the top and slightly to the right. That's what it looks like. So then you come over here and you paint this girl, and guess what? You've got the same cast shadows in the wings that are coming from the top and from the right, but then for whatever reason, to make the composition look balanced, you've added light to this wing that no longer makes sense. You've made up light in here that no longer makes sense because it's not uniform with the other wing. The lighting on her helmet and her face is coming from directly above with no angle, and I know this because the nose would cast a shadow diagonally down to the side the same way the wings are. And yeah, it's two different light sources that are the same intensity, so automatically this wing doesn't exist in the same piece as this girl. And I wouldn't notice this as much as I do if you hadn't been copying photos, because the wing looks so crisp and so well executed and so photoreal that when you make things up like the helmet and the fur over here and this guy's shield, automatically I go, oh god, one thing's really good, so by contrast everything else isn't as good, and it just breaks the illusion of the illustration. Third thing to talk about is the perspective of the guy laying down. I'm not sure exactly. It looks like this is the chest of the guy laying down, and his head would be behind that chest laying on the ground, and this body is dead, and then out of this body is coming this transparent spirit, like this Valkyrie is going to carry the spirit up to heaven. That's the read I got. But you can't see any part of this guy's head. In fact, you see this girl's knee in her dress, and there's no head here, and her arms are there. So if he's laying down on the ground, and she's pulling his spirit out of his body, and her knee is right here, and this is his chest, his face is actually under her skirt. She's almost sitting on his face. Sexual implications implied, because here's his feet, here's his arm, here's the heave of his chest, and then there's no chin. We don't see the shoulders. There's nothing there. But what we do see is that her knee is right there, and her arms, let me just point this out in case nobody gets what I'm talking about. Because the shoulders of the ghost are in line with the shoulders of the actual body, and because her hands are underneath the shoulders, I know that that knee is on the same plane in terms of space as this guy's head. And because she's wearing this skirt, there's nowhere for his head to be except inside of her skirt, which means that she's kneeling down on top of it, and that's why we can't see it. Okay, so, same thing with the birds. Light source problems. This one's in silhouette because it's lighter. This one's catching light for no real reason. It doesn't need to be there. It's not a focal point. Flipping this image, some of the flaws come out more. You can see that there's definite lean in the piece. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is drawing, planning, and not being at the mercy of your reference. This is going to go for a bit, so again, I apologize. This is less of a paint over and more of a breakdown, but things that you could have done to make this more effective. If you had been drawing this from scratch and making it up and doing your own thing, the obvious solution would be to make it an iconic X composition where her wings are up like this, up to the corners of the page, which creates this nice visual diagonal that leads down into her face, which after all is the focal point because it's catching the light. And then you'd have this nice simple thing, and then this guy's legs could be the other part of the X. And if it's unclear what I'm talking about here, I'll do a quick compositional look and show you what I mean. The other thing this achieves is that this top area of the canvas is activated, because if I shut this off, you'll notice pretty much it's just the bottom, you know, 2/3 or bottom half of the illustration is completely loaded with data. There's dudes fighting, and an angel, and wings, and feathers, and a dead guy, and a ghost, and arrows. And then up here, it's just nothing. It's nothing at all. It's almost like everything was free transformed way down into this piece, and that's it. And it's just so cluttered. So fixing it compositionally by raising the wings activates the top of the canvas and brings the viewer in. You could bend the wings down a little bit if you wanted to make it look like she had just landed or she was about to take off to give them a bit of a flutter. You know, just basic stuff. But the other weird thing about the composition is that we can't tell what that guy is right off the bat because he's very, very dim and transparent. If the idea is to make him like a glowy, transparent ghost, then unfortunately, especially the head is going to have to be significantly brighter so we can tell that he's a ghost. He shows up well on the arms because the arms are against black, but the rest of his body is against stuff that's catching light. So it needs to be way brighter in order to stand out in the piece. Okay? The other thing to talk about is that her head for her body is, I know you're using a photo, but this is the thing. Painting from photos can be very, very deceiving because the angle you're at when you shoot it can distort certain shapes and make them, appear bigger than they might need to be in the painting. Because right now, in the photo, yes, her face is that wide. Yes, her eyes are spaced that way. Yes, that's what it looks like. But in this piece, her face reads as a huge, wide face. It's much too wide. It's much too big. It just feels visually awkward in the painting. I'm going to shrink it down probably to about this. I'm going to raise it a bit to really show the neck, and I'm going to thin it out. And that's more what it should be. Still not perfect, but closer. It doesn't feel as visually weird because it sits better in the painting now. A lot of people like to argue that, photographs are from life, so whatever's in the photograph is totally accurate, and, I want to be a realist, so I'm going to copy the photograph. And that's kind of a moot point, because paintings aren't photographs. Paintings are supposed to be visually pleasing in a way that photographs sometimes can't be. You can take a very good reference that still has awkward things in it that you're going to need to fix. And when you stick yourself so far into the reference that you can't make those changes on the fly and look at a piece and go, okay, I've used my reference to inform my outcome. What now do I need to fix so this piece isn't visually awkward? If you can't do that, then your painting is going to look very disjointed, very strange, very weird. So right off the bat, these are the first 3 changes I made, and look at what it does for the piece as a whole. It feels more iconic. Her face is catching less attention because it's smaller and more balanced in the piece. The ghost shows up as a ghost instead of, if you squint your eyes for the squint test at this and you look at it, half of that ghost disappears. You can't really tell what's going on. So those are the biggest things I would do. I would either lose the birds completely or make them very small in the background, because things like that bird I just painted over, I'm going to turn it back on so you see what I'm talking about. He's just there and catching a bunch of light, and he's kind of big, and he's only there to fill that space because you didn't know what to do with it. You can say, oh, it's carrion crows, it's a war, or whatever, but they're really big, they're really detailed. Like, this is in the background. This does not need to be that detailed. That's not the focal point of your piece. No one's going to care how well you render crows if the other 90% of the image is totally broken. So stop doing that. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is, I call it the nightmare situation. I talked about it on my blog forever ago. It's something that I used to see when I was in school all the time. And it addresses a problem I see in a lot of people's portfolios that I'm definitely seeing in yours, so I think it's going to be helpful to some others. Basically, the nightmare situation is something that happened to a few friends of mine when I was in art school, and a few professionals I know now that I'm out of art school. And what that is that to either get the work out faster or to make the work look more realistic, a lot of friends of mine in school and out of school would basically shoot reference for absolutely everything, and then you'd be total slaves to the photos to make stuff look more real, to make stuff, finished faster, to have, better photographic results, I guess you would say. So they do that. It impresses people in the beginning because all they see is the rendering. And you get those low end jobs where the art directors, or maybe there isn't even an art director, don't really know what they're looking at and blah, 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 blah. And you go forward and you do those jobs, and then you get to the second tier of your freelance career and you start getting middle level jobs. And maybe, let's just use for the sake of the argument, you get a job from, say, Magic the Gathering, which is a middle tier job. You want to impress those art directors because they're from Wizards of the Coast and they have tons of connections, and if you do good work for them, you can basically move on to even bigger and better stuff. Maybe work on movies, maybe work on games, really, really cool stuff. So you want to nail this job. So they ask you to design a new planeswalker or to do a character card, and you go, okay, cool, this is going to be Dragon Master, blah, 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 and I've got the brief and I'm going to go paint it. So you go shoot your reference, you dress your friend up in whatever armor you can find, or whatever cardboard cutouts you can find that look like armor. You put your lights on them, you take the photo for the piece gets approved, you composite it in Photoshop, you go ahead, you start your final painting, everything's going good. It's Wednesday night, it's due Friday, and then all of a sudden, your art director calls you in the middle of the night, and by the way, this happens all the time. One of the art directors I work for that I'm doing a big series of work for right now called me this morning at 6 a.m. and he said I need something by the end of the day. And I had to get it done by the end of the day because that's why I'm on their payroll. So imagine your art director calls you from Wizards of the Coast and he says, hey, or she says, hey, that piece was really good. We're looking forward to getting the final, but the arms don't work anymore because we've decided to give this character a weapon. You're going to need to change them to this. And they've attached a sketch on the email, and they say, okay, so please have that for us. We can't push the deadline back. This thing has to go to print. It's a time-sensitive job. Get it done as best you can. Now, for any other artist who isn't working from photographs, doing something like that wouldn't be that much of a nightmare. It would still be stressful, yes, but because you painted everything in the painting from scratch as it is, making up an arm or a couple of arms and adding in a weapon is still going to look fairly uniform because you painted the rest of the painting the same way you're painting those arms. However, for you, it's now Thursday, the painting's due, or Wednesday, the painting's due in a day and a half, and you don't have your model, you don't have your lights, you don't have your camera, none of that can be done. You don't have time to shoot the reference, you don't have time to composite it, you don't have time to do any of that stuff and get it into the final. So now you either have to go to Google image search and find an arm that looks kind of like the one the art director was talking about, or you have to set up an action figure, or you have to make it up from the top of your head. And no matter what you do in any of those situations, because you've been painting strictly from photos for your whole career, the result is going to look so much different from the other 90% of the painting that's already done that your art director is going to know that you don't know what you're doing and you're at the mercy of your references. When you are at the mercy of your references, your painting is only as good as the weakest link in it. If everything on your character looks great and then suddenly you had to make up the feet so the feet look broken, the entire concept looks like shit now because the feet are broken. That's how art works. A painting is only as good as the weakest element in it because that's where the eyes gravitate towards. It's a sad fact of how we see art, but that's just what the brain does, especially if you're an art director. So when I was in school, this happened to multiple people, where suddenly they had to change something for their final that was due in a week, but they didn't have time to drive out and take the reference photo where they took the first one, so it didn't look anything like what they had started. And then they got a very, very low grade on it because it looked completely hodgepodged, completely made up. This has happened to multiple professionals I've known in the field who basically just, grab a bunch of stuff off Google or shoot reference of a friend, and then when they need to make something up off the top of their head, they don't know what to do, and they panic. And some of them, I've known people who've done this, have actually resulted in they didn't know how to do something, so they used another artist's work. They dropped it in, which, by the way, I'm going to zoom in on this again. This isn't meant to scare anybody. This is just meant to inform you because I'm here instructing with you guys, and my job is to inform you. I can't tell if these people down here, they look like paintings. They don't look like stock photographs. They look like an artist did them. So If this is another artist who's still working in the field and he has a copyright on this, or if he did the work for a company that owns a copyright on this, then guess what? This piece, if it's found out that you stole that, is now basically the death of your entire career. Because I'm just going to tell you from experience with people I've known this has happened to. I had a friend last year who worked for a very high level card company who had the same problem you're having right now, and he didn't know how to resolve something in the piece. He saw another artist that was fairly prolific who had tackled the same kind of problem, and instead of trying to learn from that artist because he was on a tight deadline, he copied that artist's results to get the job done on time, thinking nobody would notice. But people noticed, and he works for nobody now because word got out that he had stolen art from this other guy, and now nobody will hire him because that is the lowest thing you can do. Stealing something directly from another artist's painting who's working in the field is basically going to make you public enemy number one in the online community. Now, yes, people study other people all the time. People steal elements of other people's stuff. People copy styles. All that stuff is totally fine. But literally lifting things from other people's paintings to get yours done faster is not something you can do. Even if it's photographs. Even if you think they're stock photographs, you better make sure. And even if they are stock photographs, what's your art director going to think if he finds out that half the paintings you've done for him are composites of stock photographs and you're not actually painting any of it? Maybe he'll want to hire the guy who actually knows how to paint and get rid of you. This is all stuff to consider because, trust me, it is going to matter. I know you're not at a point where this is a big deal yet, but how you learn how to paint is a big, big factor in the artist you end up becoming. So if you don't nip these practices in the bud now, they're going to basically pollute your whole career, and I don't want to see that happen to you. You're doing a lot of hard work. You're doing a lot of drawing. You're putting a lot of research hours in. You're doing a lot of compositing. These are all really good things. You know, work ethic is great. But these methods of learning, the tracing, the photo composites, the ripping of other people's images, the not doing thumbnails, the not planning out the composition beforehand, this is all stuff that's going to literally tank your career. So I'm trying to tell you to please, 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 please stop doing this. Go back to the drawing board, literally and figuratively. Start over from scratch. I'd rather see a really, really bad drawing that you worked incredibly hard on and pushed yourself on than an extremely rendered, broken mash of photographs and other people's work. I'd much rather see the former, because the former is you, and this is not you. This is a collection of things that you found or took photographs of, placed in the most appropriate order you can think of. So in terms of a paint over, like I said, I'm not going to be doing much because I think you should honestly either paint over this directly or start over. But the biggest things to take away is that we can't see this ghost guy. We don't know what he is. So you got to make him brighter, you got to make him pop. You got to shrink that girl's face and you got to place it in a better way so it looks like her neck's raised. You got to look at your lighting in a serious way because so much stuff in this is sinking into black that I can't tell what's where. You know, I'm going to bring some bounce light into the neck here. But, yeah. And again, I know this sounds harsh. I'm sorry. I have to be harsh. I see tons of people doing this, and it's not something you can do. It's just not something you can do. It's going to destroy your portfolio. So in terms of paint over, I think that's really probably it for me. I'll put some more clouds in here just to balance it out a bit. But yeah, I am sorry. I'll try and crit some of your other work. I saw some other stuff that didn't have the level of problems that this one had. But yeah, I mean really, I do apologize. So yeah, when you're looking at your levels, when you're doing your next painting, the amount of stuff that sinks into black in this is like, you know, half the painting is black pretty much. You don't want to necessarily do that, fall into that trap. But anyway, I'm going to get off of here for now. I'm going to be doing a long series of paintovers in the next coming days. Basically, I'm doing 10 hours a week. That's kind of the deal that I've got going. So I did, 4 hours with Sean. I did another 4 hours the other day. I did some independent crit and review, set up some stuff on the site. I did this. That tallies me out at about 10. I'm going to be doing another 10 next week. If you'd like some help in the paintover thread, I know today's was kind of harsh, but that's because this was a big thing that I'm seeing a lot that I wanted to address with some firsthand knowledge and from college and other stuff. But yeah, if you want help with a piece and you don't know what to do, please put it in the paintover thread in the crit section on the artcamp forums, and I will take a look. A bunch of stuff I've already done is there. Videos will always be on demand and on YouTube for anybody that misses these live in case they want to tune in later. But yeah, thanks for submitting. Thanks everybody who's watching. Thanks to everyone who's watching later. I'll upload the JPEG of this, even though my advice is to start over because of the elements in the background and the fact that a lot of this is broken. But if you want to do this piece over again, or even, fix the one that you started, if you think you can and you want to put the hours in, my advice compositionally for the piece, to make it more portfolio ready, to make it more striking, to make it more iconic, is to do the things I've done here. I'll turn them on and off again so you can see the difference. This is just, makes it a stronger illustration. But yeah. Basically, for the record, seeing things like this hand down here in a part of the painting that isn't important at all, this bottom corner, seeing this hand painted as realistically and as well as it is, next to this helmet, which doesn't wrap her face, doesn't sit on her face, isn't casting a shadow, her nose isn't sticking out. Like, that's what I'm talking about. Just weirdness in the image, where you can tell some things were directly referenced and some things weren't. Nothing breaks an image faster than that. It completely kills the illusion. Alright, yeah, it's been fun. Apologies again. I'll be on here probably tomorrow doing another set of crits. So I'll see you guys then. And bye.